Health pool. Damage. Hitbox. Heroic. Alysrazor. Or Alysrazor if you prefer. Here's the TLDW. Situate yourself into 3 groups. Flying team. Left team. Right team. Left and right teams have a tank, healers, and DPS. 6 for your flying team initially and 25. 1 to 2 on 10. Your flying players pick up 3 feathers. The remainder to ground casters to cast while moving. Flying team goes to rings and beats on the boss, hiding behind a meteor when firestorm happens. The ground melee, focus, interrupt, and stun. Initiates. The range focus, priority, meteor. Initiate. Hatchling. The tanks position themselves closest to the hatchlings, and more or less solo the hatchlings, dragging them over a worm when they get the debuff hungry. 2 sets of initiates, 1 set of birds for each firestorm. All teams hide behind the meteor during firestorm. This cycle repeats twice. This transitions into the Vortex phase. Get to ground level, dodge tornadoes, circling around the room. Burnout, free damage phase, suck her down. Interrupt the ads, while focusing her down. At 50 energy, the tank taunts her, facing her away from the raid. Cooldowns to survive the debuff stack. Healers maintain and sustain the health of the raid, up until the point that she hits 100 energy, where she will burst damage and do a knockback, and the fight will repeat from the beginning, until her health reaches 0. Okay, now for a thorough explanation of the fight. You need to split your raid into 3 groups to cover 3 general areas. On 25 man, 6 people for your Sky team. Classes like Mage, Warrior, Rogue, etc. Anything that could benefit from a ton of haste and a ton of crit. These will be your flyboys. You split the rest of your raid. 1 tank, half your healers, half your melee, half your ranged. A team to cover east and west. Initial pull, unavoidable knockback. Pull after wipe, you can avoid the knockback by putting your back to a niche in the wall. Alysrazor puts a wall of fire where she comes in from, then blazing claws across the boss arena. This is a massive 180-degree frontal cone. Trail behind her or be off to the side. Her hitbox is massive in this form. Range should have no issue hitting her from somewhere safe. As she does this, she is molting feathers in her wake. 18 to 23 on 25 man, 9 to 11 on 10 man. Some attempts seem to vary on the amount. These despawn if they are not interacted with within 40 seconds of spawning. This section covers your fly team. They will pick up 3 feathers each and then assault Alysra in the sky, while playing the Sonic-esque minigame of flying through rings and avoiding obstacles. Each ring that you fly through will increase your haste by 8%, while simultaneously refreshing your flight buff. After you reach 25 stacks, you will get the debuff called Alysrazor. Not even mad. This lasts for 40 seconds and is refreshed for every ring that you run through, much like Blazing Power and the flight buff. A minute and 40 seconds into the fight, she will channel Firestorm with like a 7-second window to get the safety. If your ground team was successful, there will be a boulder for you to hide behind on the ground, giving you a line of sight to avoid this wipe mechanic. After it is completed, you fly back up. 80 seconds later, you do the same thing. 60 seconds after that, the Vortex phase begins and you get close to the ground, as to not die from fall damage. This section will cover the ground teams. If there are any remaining feathers, your casters or healers can opt to gain the buff. This will increase their movement speed by 30% per feather, and grant them the ability to cast spells while moving. Allow whoever would benefit the most from these to acquire them. As Alysra reaches the other side, the following events will occur. Near the rim of the arena, 2 initiates will spawn on opposite sides, with 4 worms in the center. From this point, at the 7-second mark, 2 eggs will be placed in the center of the arena, with a herald of the end in between them, indicating where the birds and meteor will spawn. At the 15-second mark, the hatchlings will spawn, the meteor will spawn. It is important to understand these sequence of events as to not get blindsided by what you have to counter. Everyone should open up on these initiates, stunning and incapping brushfire, and interrupting Fiery Blast, getting them as close to dead as you can before the meteor becomes a thing, where your tanks in range will break off. The tanks will then position themselves to be the closest target to the respective hatchling, as they will apply the debuff Imprinted to their closest target, fixating them for permanent aggro and giving them an 11 times multiplier for damage. Very shortly after these are active, the meteor will spawn in the center of the room, and then barrel to a wall in one of 8 directions. It is absolutely crucial that this meteor is killed, so that it rests in place and is later used as an object to line of sight a raid wipe mechanic. If anyone is standing where the Herald of the End is attempting to clock Tower Majora, along with him, they will be obliterated. If any melee attempt to hit the Rolling Moon, it will Katamari their Damacy. It is absolutely up to the range to save the raid. And if the meteor is not destroyed, it'll hit the wall, splitting into 3 unusable meteors that will become mildly annoying obstacles to avoid. Around 5 seconds after the meteor lands, there will be another set of initiates, on separate sides at the edge of the room. About 30 seconds after the first meteor, a second meteor will spawn. If you successfully killed the first meteor and have something to hide behind, you can ignore this one. Otherwise, this is your chance to make up for failing the first time. 25 seconds after this meteor has landed, she will begin casting Firestorm. Separate section for your tank during the ground phase. You will deal significant damage to the hatchling that has imprinted you. It has a 3-stage mood gimmick. It spawns happy for 10 seconds. Afterward, it becomes hungry. Every swing it lands on you, it has a chance to proc Tantrum. Tantrum increases its melee damage and haste by 50%. You can cancel the Tantrum or change it from hungry to satiated by running it near a plump lava worm. This will sate its hunger for a full 10 seconds, where it will become hungry again. Each tank has 2 worms to utilize. Additionally, it casts an ability called Gushing Wounds. This applies a minute-long bleed debuff to the tank that ticks damage every 0.2 seconds. Yes, 5 times a second. It should fall off if your health reaches 50%. It also cleaves in a 6-yard cone in front of the mob. Note, not only does this debuff not fall off, there is a second variant of it that also does not fall off when you reach 50%. As of current, that has combined a total of 60,000 unmitigated bleed damage every second. This obviously is not intended, and will hopefully be fixed. The current workaround is bopping it off. The worms are a mild obstacle for your ranged, spinning and performing lava spew in an 18-yard cone. Your range should aid you in downing the hatchling after the first initiates, meteor, and second initiates are taken care of, if you are in need of that assist. And now, where all the parts meet up. A minute and 40 seconds in, she does a 5-second channel for Firestorm that commits to a separate channel that broadcasts an AoE raid-wide, which is line-of-sighted behind the meteor that was killed in the midst of the ground phase, relative to the position of the boss. Underneath the boss, after she is done casting Firestorm, she will produce a plethora of new molten feathers. If there is anyone else that you would like to send up, if you are covered on damage on the ground team, you can do so now. Or you can have more of your casters pick up the feather to cast while moving. Or you can have your DPS fly in the ground phase to assist on the first set of initiates quicker. Just as long as your tanks do not get the flight buff, and if they decide to get it, to cancel it immediately, for very obvious reasons. Everything that has transpired so far will repeat again. 80 seconds from the first Firestorm ending, the second will occur. This phase repeats for another 60 seconds, where the Vortex phase will take place. She will then arc down toward the center of the arena, just above the ground. Remember when I said her hitbox is massive? Well, you're about to find out how big that is. She then begins to NASCAR above the arena. As she does this, she will produce harsh winds. Anyone still in the air will lose their ability to fly, get close to the ground. A fiery vortex will encompass the center of the arena that will deal damage to anyone within its 15-yard radius. There will be 5 tornadoes in alternating directions at different spacing from this vortex. In a 10-yard radius, they will deal 90,000 fire damage every 0.3 seconds. This portion of the boss's model's hitbox is so massive that your melee should be able to hit her, no matter where she is, if they are in the first 2 tracks of the tornadoes, so long as they are facing her and bucking and weaving the incoming tornadoes. This phase lasts 35 seconds from start to finish. It is here that she will experience Burnout, collapse to the ground and have 0 energy. She will take 50% increased damage, and every spell used against her will proc Essence of the Green, restoring 10% mana on every hit. During this time, she has a buff called Spark. This baseline restores her energy by 3 points every 2 seconds. 2 mobs with a disgusting amount of health will spawn, called Claw Shapers, at a decent distance from the boss. You want to grip and interrupt these guys close to the boss, so that you can maintain interrupts on them, as they cast an ability called Ignition, giving Alysrazor 1 energy every second it is channeled. When interrupted, they can opt to melee, but the melee is insignificant, much like the spinners in the Bethelak encounter. Your top priority is to do as much damage to her as you can while keeping these mobs from giving you energy, as when she hits 50 energy, they will fly away. She will become ignited, pulsating blazing buffet every 2 seconds, dealing damage to everyone in the raid, regenerating 2 energy every second, while spamming the ability she started this fight with, Blazing Claw, every 1.4 seconds. Your tank should taunt the boss as he transitions to 50%. She will get off about 13 casts of Blazing Claw, increasing the physical and fire damage they take by 10% per stack, lasting for 15 seconds. In the midst of this stacking up, they should roll cooldowns to survive it. Your healer should sustain the raid in the tank's health. For when she hits 100 energy, she will cast Full Power, dealing 80,000 fire damage and causing a knockback that was similar to what started this fight, which is pretty prophetic, as she places molten feathers on the ground, and the fight repeats from the very first step until she reaches 0% health. If you already had 2 or 3 stacks of feather, 1 feather will give you flight. The only difference from the beginning is that you have more options of mobility. And that is Alysrazor.
Are these risks like the...
I'm in here!
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. Huge thank you to my Patreon supporters. Here is a list of the things and the stuff that I use. Check out Alondo. He has some entertaining moments. Links to my Twitch and Patreon. And I will see you again soon. TM.